1 minute.
Kind of go like this.
Can you try it from actually where you are right now? It's going. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
All right, now it's at the first one.
Did it move it back?
Yep, it's back at the front.
It's that sensitive, awesome.
Should be good.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, the little light on your microphone is red.
Ah,
That means it's on.
okay. See.
And then I review it.
I'd like to call the February 16th monthly work session to order. First item on the agenda is the Food Nutrition Services Point of Service software.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to call Mr. Dumas up, and Ms. Dan up. We've had this software, our food service software, for a long, long time, and it's time for us to update that. And so we have something that I know Mr. Dumas is going to talk about, and Sarah Dan will talk about today, to give you an update as far as where we are and what we like and what we may like to put in place to upgrade our old system. Mr. Dumas.
Thank you, Dr. Asplin. I appreciate it very much. Really, my role here today is to introduce Sarah and let her take the reins and give you this presentation. I would say that Sarah, in the time she's been the Director of Food Nutrition Services, has done a wonderful job of taking a look at systemically in the department, what are we doing well, but then what do we need to do to make some changes to prepare us for the future and make sure kids are getting the right meals, and we're staying on top of trends, right? So as food tastes change, how does that department stay on top of things so that we're the choice that students make, not that you have to have this school lunch, but we want you to be the choice. And so as part of that total analysis of the entire department, one of the things that Sarah really has focused on and brought it to my attention right away, she said, listen, Jody, at the end of the day, I think we're doing good things with people, but our systems have been outdated for a long time, and they're really limiting what we can do as a department. And it's taken us longer to do certain things, and it shouldn't. And at the end of the day, in terms of our metrics, how we track departments in terms of their performance, food and nutrition, in terms of the dietary offerings that we're making sure we're hitting those benchmarks from a state perspective and from a federal perspective, those are always difficult things to track. And so a lot of what the software is going to do is bring us in the 21st century with a lot of our processes, and allow us to do some things like track that nutrition over time, which is a great metric for her department. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah Dan, our Director of Food Nutrition Services. Sarah.
Good afternoon. Hopefully you guys.
Use the microphone, please.
Yep, sorry. You did say make sure the button was red. Good afternoon. Like I said, I just want to share with you, I know you've got this presentation ahead of time, but I do want to share with you just some high points of our proposed point of service software and what it can do for our department, but also for our students in Sarasota County. So we're going to turn it over. Oh, okay. Oh, press the wrong button. Okay. Oh. So again, just to tell you just a little history of our point of service software, we're currently using a program called WebSmart. It is the current program for the district. It is a program that out at the schools for ordering in the district office. It was actually implemented in November or December of 2006. We also have 3 other programs: NutriSlice, which is what communicates our menus to our customers; Primero Edge, which is kind of our record keeping production reports; and then Rocket Scan, which is what we use to process our free and reduced. So some of the challenges: the current software is 15 years old. It is not supported by the company anymore. And as the department as a whole has actually 4 separate software programs from 4 different companies, and they don't talk to each other, which is a little challenging as well. So the program that we're looking at it's called MCS Software. It's actually by the same company, Horizon. And just some high points of it, it integrates the whole department so that we have one program to serve the entire department's management. So the aspects of that are a better financial management. It's intuitive and user-friendly. And obviously, many people in our department have various skill levels when it comes to technology, so that will be helpful. Custom data to make decision-making quicker, and then increased efficiency for staff, and then better customer service. And so actually, the program is defined by geniuses, which I think is kind of cute and a little clever. So the front of the house, that is what happens at the school sites. It works offline. How many times, and I don't know if you are all made aware of this, but we have Frontier cuts a line or something happens, and we have to go to rosters, which is a paper way of doing meal service. This will allow us to keep the registers open, run point of service for our students, so we can get the kids in, eating, and back to class in a timely manner. Whenever that happens, it can disrupt the education day, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Also, one of the things that we hope to get to in the future is that this technology would allow us to accept credit cards in the line. Now, we wouldn't do that at the elementary school, but many times high school students will say to us, we would buy lunch, it's just that I can't use my credit card. You know, our kids they just are using different types of payment plans, and so it will allow us to move into better technology to serve our customers.
Excuse me, can I ask you what that quickly search for students without an ID?
Yes.
So they don't have to put their number in, or what?
Well, it would be if a student didn't have their number or didn't know it. That does happen from time to time as well. And so
Okay, so if the student doesn't have their ID or
Yes.
doesn't remember it, okay.
However, this technology would interface. We've been able to do scan cards this year, but this would interface in a greater way. We were able to make that happen with COVID, but this would be something that we could move forward to completely with those ID cards, which is, you know, eventually I think that's the wave of the future, that a student would have an ID card.
Yeah, and so just so you know, more systemically, we're working on a student ID badge that would be issued to the student, and that would work in food nutrition services. It would track the student on the bus, whatever they purchased or rented, took out of media, so it works systemically for that student throughout the district. So that's also being worked on in conjunction with what Sarah's doing here.
Okay.
May I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Would that student ID card, which I have been in favor of for many, many, many years, would it also do attendance?
That's a good question. I think
I mean, I don't see any reason to go to any system this day and age unless we're going to use it for attendance as well.
Yeah, so I can't tell you yes or no. That's certainly something we need to work on. And my goal would be to let it be used in as many aspects of the student transfer of data that we need to, so that becomes easy for everybody. But we'll follow up on that. We've got a small group working on that now, and we'll continue to have that conversation.
Great.
Okay. Oh, let's get back to where we were. So the back of the house, that's what goes on at the central office. Oh, I think it. Oh, it did move forward. Sorry about that. Just some other things that will go on at the school site as well is at the serving line is account management. Right now, our current software only has an 8-character alert for students with food allergies. That's it. And if you have a student with multiple food allergies, or you need to convey more critical information, it can be a little challenging. This software would allow us to mark food items so that a cashier can't make a mistake of giving a student something. It would give an alert. Plus, the characters or the amount of information we can put at the cash register is much more involved. So it's more than 8 characters. So we can really keep our kids safer. We've been really good and very proactive as a department, but as just the needs of our students, we need to be able to we need to convey better information and make sure that we can do that. Also, account balances will be updated in real time. So if a parent does put money into a student's account, right now it's 24 hours, but we would be able to do more of that as well. Free and reduced. And this is something that I'm excited about as well. We would be able to email letters to parents saying that they need to fill out free and reduced applications. That's something that we spend a lot of postage mailing to parents that maybe haven't filled out applications for a current school year. So being able to just communicate in a way that, how many of us get an email or get a letter in the mail and we don't even look at it? But we often will check our email and text messaging. And so again, it would import directly certified students, and it'll allow us to reach those families in need in a greater way. Again, it would have Franklin, which is a free and reduced applications software, which is all integrated, would increase our connection and communication with our parents in a more timely manner.
I think, Jane, do you have another question?
Oh,
Yes, I did. Talking about emailing parents, there was a survey done recently by parents, not here, but in other parts of the state. And the question was, why is it that you don't read the emails that we sent you? Well, I'm too busy. And so is there any way that we could do some checking as to what is the best vehicle for communicating to parents? Because I don't know if it's text. I mean, I hear now they get too many messages from us about what's happening at schools. I'm getting too many messages. I'm like, oh, okay. But I just wondered if there was a standard for what they prefer, and if we could take a look at that, because I think that would be very important and insightful for you and your team.
Yeah, I think that, let me just comment on that. So that's something that Craig Maniglia in the back, he's probably smiling as you're talking about that. We're having ongoing conversations right now about what's the proper way to communicate for each type of communication going out to parents, going out internally, because there are a lot of connect eds that come from a particular school, and that may be everything under the sun. And then another school does something a little bit different. And then how do we communicate central types of items? So all of that needs to be looked at, and then Craig and his team are looking at the overall communications process and how we're getting information to parents. Right, so that they look at it when we need them to look at it. So we're looking at that.
absolutely. So Edison, which is the back of the house, that's everything that occurs at the central office. Minimize cost and waste. Obviously, in food nutrition services, the best way to be financially responsible is we have 3 areas. One is our labor, our food cost, and then inventory, and that's the money we have on the shelves. Right now, that process is very antiquated, and especially with inventory. Inventory is done by hand and then transferred onto a computer and then transferred again. Ordering, same thing. It's done on the computer, then transferred again by hand into another computer system. And again, there's just lots of opportunities for mistakes, or food to go missing, or food to be just hanging out and we're not aware of it. And when you have to look into that, it can be very time consuming as well. This would allow it to be very quicker and more accurate. And also will continue to allow us to share our menus with our families, students, and parents, and reach them, and hopefully continue to entice them to dine with us.
Ms. Ziegler also has a comment or a question.
Thank you. One of the things that I think you brought up, and especially as far as the multiple systems you have and then it being a bit antiquated, but so the efficiencies being key. For scale purposes, can you give us a sense of how many families, because that's the big question, and I know this for the most part, but how many students do we feed? When you talk about the number of inventory that we have, because if you're talking about that we're doing this by hand, there's a financial impact both on human side and also the cost of goods.
Absolutely. So we, right now, for this particular school year, we have served about 2.3 million meals since school started. Now, that's at 38 locations plus some charter schools. And so with charter schools that we do provide meal service to, it's about 50 locations. We know that there are parents every single day that do not know what's going on in our department, whether it's a menu, whether it's free and reduced, whether it's just knowing what kind of services we have available that we could help them if their student has food allergies. So besides the students we do feed, we're also missing opportunities. I know last year I spoke to you guys and we looked at the trend of what our menu and participation, it's been pretty flat over the last 4 or 5 years. We're even finding even today, even though meals have been free and will continue for this school year, we talk to parents every day who don't know that. So I really believe we're missing a lot of opportunities to provide kids with nutritious meals. This year in particular with the Department of Defense, we have put more fresh fruit in our students' on our students' trays than probably we've done in years because we have just all these additional support with COVID, and our parents aren't even, I don't know if all of our parents are aware of that. So we want to I think this is going to help us get the word out and just help us be more efficient.
And if you think from a business perspective, all of those meals at all of those sites, all of that inventory coming in throughout the work week, and then somebody at that site having to hand enter that this got here today, versus where Sarah wants to get comes off the truck, I scan it, the system knows it's in here. When I transfer inventory, scan it from one location to another. Just think of the efficiencies in that process versus wasting time keying stuff in.
That's where I was going, just because I think the pure scale of it, and
Yes.
unless you've toured it and seen how many meals we actually do a day, it's hard to grapple.
Yeah,
so thank you.
thank
Just wanted
you.
to point that out.
Ms. Rose?
Thank you. You talk about being able to communicate directly with parents, and I think that is great. Can they communicate back with you? I know from a school site, you're consistently getting phone calls trying to families reasonably believing that they can communicate with food and nutrition. Is there a way for them to better communicate with you with food allergies or those kinds of pieces?
So yes, there is. They can contact the central office. I just feel like sometimes some of those families aren't intentionally, there's some misconnections that occur. And so we're hoping that in the future we can continue to do that, because they can reach out to us on our Facebook page as well as call the central office. But I do think there's times when parents unfortunately have had to go through multiple steps, and we want to try to change that.
Well, that's what I was asking, if there is a place in the system that gives them a clearer path to directly communicate with you without having to go through several doors or conversations. Does the system allow that, or have an avenue?
Currently, I think that is a little bit of a challenge. They have to go to either the district website, know that the central office, or if they speak to a school and they direct that parent to the central office. I do think it's probably a little more challenging than it needs to be.
And then secondly, the time through the line from a school-based perspective, we're building schedules around lunches and essentially how much time it takes, particularly in the larger schools, to get students through a line. So did I hear you clearly that this system would allow that to be more efficient, allowing students less time in line and more time to eat?
Yes, that is definitely the goal of the system.
And do you have any any time frame of what we would be gaining? Because honestly, every minute is of great value. And again, I know in middle schools that half the time is taken getting through the line. So for me, that is from an instructional standpoint, that's a huge piece. And I would be interested in what kind of efficiency you're talking about. For example, in a 30-minute lunch, 15 minutes for 400 students to get through in 3 different lunches. So obviously that would be less, but.
So one of the things that we're going to be looking at as we're moving forward, because our department, obviously with everything that's happened, is going to be in more of a rebuilding phase as we get out of COVID, is what do we need to do to streamline that process? And so it may be that there are less choice, not slighting nutrition quality, but less choice possibly. We're actually, because one of my first goals is to continue to work in the middle schools and high schools. What I'm seeing is that seems to be our greatest opportunity for growth as a department and our customer base.
Right, and I just want to be clear, I'm not saying you're not efficient. I think you've done a fabulous job in my experience in years. I'm just wanting to be very public that if this system does allow that, because that was also a consistent parent concern of time through line, takes away from time to eat, and, exactly what does this system gain in efficiency, which makes it much more worthwhile to me.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that I don't think they've done any time studies, but I would say that the user interface from the cashier's perspective that I've been able to see, that Sarah's shown me, puts a lot of information at the fingertips of the cashier. It makes it very intuitive. And so increased efficiency with the cashier, and then making sure that the kids have their cards, have their IDs coming through. I think this system will absolutely provide that so that they're coming through the line quicker. But to say it's going to be, a second a student or whatever, we don't know yet. But I would say that, again, the user interface is key to making sure that cashier can push them through as quick as possible. And I think it's set up effectively. So.
Oh, and I think that's perfect information, because in my experience, the delay doesn't come from the choices, and I'm certainly not advocating for less choice. I think choice is great for students to want to eat. It actually is at the cashier, so greater efficiency would be awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And our current program, like any technology, most technology's life, from what I've seen, is 6 to 8 years. This is 15 years old, and so I think there's going to be a better. Just a greater speed, because we'll have more up-to-date information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I noticed as a parent going through the line, or a grandparent going through the line, I think maybe more information at point of service from this side or the other side might help. Like at the milk. Milk is included with the lunch, but separately it's 25 cents or whatever it is. And here's the choices, with your meal. And then when you get to the fruit and the vegetables, what they can choose 2 or something like
Yes.
that. And the juice, so if they could just say, all right, this is included with the meal, or a la carte, or on its own. I don't think a kindergartner knows what a la carte means. So that they can make those choices or understand, especially when they get to middle and high school, where they might not be taking the meal, but for how much does an orange cost when they're going through the line? Something like that. So they might, be able to make those choices and those decisions, and perhaps even have the change out when they get there. Sure, those who have been through the system probably know this, but you're always having new kids going through, or
Absolutely.
something like that, or at least in the beginning of the year. So I would just think maybe point of service signage, perhaps.
So, and that's one of the other things. So this all ties into each other. Right now, stuff has to be printed out of Primero Edge and then re-entered into NutriSlice. With this current, with the proposed software, that all talks. And again, that can be downloaded on an app where students can look and see. And most of our middle schools and high schoolers do have some sort of technology where they have a phone with them. And so again, I think educating them on what's available and the choices, I think, will really help to maybe attract them into coming, because some of them just think they don't know, or they're not sure where to look. Obviously, this would also tie into digital signage. We do have digital signage in some of our high schools and if one elementary school, but we would be able to expand that and cover a greater audience.
Ms. Goodwin?
So we will have one integrated system as opposed to having 4.
Yes.
And we will not have the duplication of effort of having to enter at the application site for each piece of software. Will this system integrate with what we have now so that we can simply do an upload,
So,
or do we have to do a lot of data entry?
we do have to do some data entry this summer if we are able to purchase this software. However, the company does some of that for us, and so we another school district that we purchase with. Pasco County Schools they use this software currently, and so we'll be able to use some of their information as well. So that's going to ease that transition. But we do know that there's going to be a little bit of entry and things that labor that we need to do this summer to get this ready for the fall. But every school district that we know that has gone through this, once they've gone through it, it's so worth the effort.
I'm sure this company has what they call a bridge software, where they can take what's on your system and turn it over to theirs. So they just have to write a software to say this column goes to that column and come up with that.
I had another question.
All right, go ahead.
And the other question that I have is, last year, you and I chatted about some of your personnel not having the right skill set. Will this new platform and these new opportunities mesh well with personnel?
Yes, because they'll be able to do the training from the beginning.
Great.
And then we will update our information for training in the future as people, because people will come and go, and that happens as well.
Well, I know that you have had quite a last couple of years, Sarah. Beverly was our hero for many years, and she left and retired, and there were a lot of things that happened. A big audit that was dropped in your lap, I think, upon your first entering as the director of the department,
Yes.
and that's a lot of fun. And some other things relative to personnel and of course the COVID. So thank you for all you do. You do a great job, and we love you. And I could use your help with the fair, because I think we're going to have the fair this year. So I'm going to be talking to you about that.
We're already behind in schedule on this. If you could highlight what's left.
Yes, let me just get to this one last slide. Oh, I don't know what happened. So just some additional information, the last page. So we've already secured 2 servers. IT, information technology, has gotten those for us. So it's about a cost savings, about $30,000. And just some, it will just increase our efficiency, our professionalism, our accountability in all levels. And we'll have better control in managers' paperwork and reporting requirements, inventory control, ordering of food and supplies, getting our information to our families regarding meal benefits, status changes, and unpaid charges. And then we'll just have better control on our food allergies, and so student safety. So, thank you.
Bridget?
I'll be quick, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I think we all understand the necessity for the efficiency standpoint. And in my read ahead, I know that there's a cost savings of the $30,000 with the servers, but what is the cost of this program?
Absolutely. So it's a little over $144,000. It will come out of capital. We had planned for this prior to COVID, and so it should be on. They'll be on the board. I think the 2nd of March. So you'll see that then.
Is that, it's all in 144,000, or is that the
That's
startup?
No, that's it this time. So originally, when we did this in 2006, it was much more involved. But because the company, this is the upgrade of their previous softwares that they've owned, it's definitely, I think, a much more reasonable price tag this time.
Mr. Edwards?
I'll be quick. Thanks for asking that question, because that was on my mind. And also, any ancillary equipment such as point of sale, do we have to upgrade? I saw the 30,000. We had upgraded servers already, but are there any other hidden costs out there in terms of hardware that we're not aware of?
No, because the computers that we're currently using, we can run this software on there as well.
Okay. And you also mentioned about smartphone, kids have phones, and will that also integrate into all of those kinds of things? Okay, great. And I'll ask you personally, but it manages leftovers. I could use that in my house. So thanks for your work.
Okay.
And also, separate from that, communication, I think, is huge. When I was sworn in, I talked about all of the food and all of your hard work and all of the things that you've done, and it is continues to be an undersung piece of what our school system is doing for our community. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm really blessed. Amazing team at the central office. Our managers and the people on the front line are just out there doing a great job feeding the kids, in trying times. And so very appreciative of their efforts and the great work they're doing out there. So thank you.
Well, we'd all like to thank you for what you're doing for our
Thanks.
kids. And last on the list is Dr. Asplin.
Just real quickly, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a yearly cost of $25,000?
So it is the yearly cost. Right now, we have yearly costs for every single program. This yearly cost for this program is $43,000.
43. So it's 144 to start and then 43,000 a year.
But we pay that, and we'll be eliminating the 4 separate costs.
What were those?
So it's about 65,000. So
Oh, so
there
it's
should
actually going to be a cost savings.
Well, we're running 3 separate programs.
Well, you get a star then. You should have led with that.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Next, budget. Do you want to?
Yes, Mitzi and Krista are going to lead us in the operational budget this morning.
Was this revised since we got the read ahead because we got another set? It was? Okay.
I tried to see where it changed. Could you tell us where it changed?
It changed in the transfer for food service on the function page. Basically, we're going to have to give funds to food service in order for them not to have a deficit this year from general fund.
The funds to what?
A transfer to food service.
Okay.
We have to do that this year for them not to be in a deficit.
The difference is it wasn't showing up in your 2021 line. It was only showing up in 21-22, and we'll do the same. We have it budgeted in both years. Food Nutrition Services is a great program, but they are not receiving the revenues that offset their expenses. Predominantly, I think, because they have staff, and we don't want to lay off staff just because they're not serving as many meals, because once those kids come back and they start serving the meals, it's really hard to ramp that staff back up. Most of those staff work for us for their benefits, not so much for the pay. And again, if we were to have to lay staff off, we'd be paying unemployment, which we have to reimburse anyway. So there isn't really a savings for that. So right now, we're having the general fund help to offset the losses that are being sustained in food and nutrition. So that's what that dollar amount was for that change. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll start with going over the narrative on the budget where we anticipate ending this year in actuals, and then talking about level funding for next year, and then the governors. So to get started with the narrative, what you see in your documents is that the revenues for this year are remaining the same as the last time you saw them as far as in the FEFP, based on Executive Order 6 and 7. We haven't received any updates yet from the state as far as the third calculation, and I'm not sure that they're going to send anything other than for the add-on FTE, the tests that our kids passed. So those things are all the same. We anticipate a $1.5 million reduction based upon sharing with the districts and virtual that are over their FTE. And then McKay and Florida Family Empowerment is coming in a little less than we thought it was going to, so that it actually gives us a savings in our revenues. something that is changing, obviously, this year in local is that our interest revenue is going to be down about $2 million. So, but fortunate for us, the sale of the airspace is about $2 million, so it kind of offset that. So that's what you see as a change. As far as in appropriations, your the CARES, as you know, ended up paying for the 5 extra duty days, so that was great. So that has been reflected now in the budget information you see. We are down. We were projected to have 44,845 students, and for the October survey, we were down approximately 1,400. So as of December 31st, the district still has about 100 instructional vacancies, but probably about 40 of them are due to leave, so they're not necessarily true vacancies. So that's why you see salaries are down. In district purchase services, those are also expected to come in under projection, mainly due to the decrease in travel expenditures, and the Department of Education has asked us to reclassify the way the PICO funding comes in and how it's supposed to be accounted for. It used to hit in this line for charters, but now it's hitting in a different line, so it's just been moved. Electricity is coming in a little bit higher. Obviously, we have a lot of airflow being pushed through. And something that is also increasing is in the consumables, the materials, instructional materials, is our textbooks. We have an adoption coming up, 2 of them. And this year, we're going to have to put in about $4 million more than what we're allocated in that categorical. Next year, it's going to be about $3.5 million more. The other things that are going up, and it's just due to trending capital expenditures are actually, those are a little lower, but the other expenses is going to be higher mostly due to the transfer in the way that we have to report the PICO funding, because that's where it's going. But it's also going to be up because of our testing. Our kids are doing really well in the AP, IB, and ACE. We really have a great district, and students do well, teachers do well. So based upon that, also, like I said, the last thing is that the food service is going to have a transfer from general fund in order not to be in a deficit situation, and we're estimating that at this point in time to be $1.6 million. So the net still gets us to a good financial condition ratio of 12.18%. So instead of being a negative 21 million like we originally thought, we're going to be on negative 12 million. But again, that's partly because the CARES reduced the 5 extra duty days, which was over 5 million. So there's definite reasons as to why that's coming in lower. And also at the 5-day count, we reduced 34 teachers, instructional positions, vacancies. So going on to next year, we're estimating at this point in time. So we just got the Department of Education's projection for our district. And basically, it came in at 42,996, which is basically where we're sitting as of October. It's like a baseline. So they're not really anticipating growth for our district. That's what the governor's budget is based upon, where we are today. And remember, where we are today is about 1,100 students FTE lower than we were before. That 1,100 students, or FTE, equates to about a $9.5 million revenue reduction. That's what we would have incurred this year if they had not held us harmless. So we built that into next year for level funding. So the governor's is a little bit better, obviously, than level funding, and they're giving us an estimated $304 more per FTE overall. Something that did, when we were negotiating or working with the Department of Education for the projection of FTE, they did allow us to add more students for kindergarten, redshirting kindergarten. So the second calculation that we get, or the conference report, will actually have those numbers in it. It was about 187 FTE for that, so that was good. So the preliminary position control budgets that have been created for going out for the staffing process are being aligned with obviously what DOE has said as far as our FTE projection. So they're going to be aligned to class size. What this equates to in the budget that you've been presented is a reduction of approximately 30 additional instructional units to offset the student reduction. The salaries and the benefits that you see, the salaries have been increased by the 0.5% contractually. And then the FRS has gone up 8.2% in benefits, and medical insurance 2%. In purchase services, we have an additional charter school that is slated to open, Dreamers Academy, so we've accounted for them. And then energy services, we're planning on those continuing to trend higher because of the way students are returning to brick and mortar. Again, and as I mentioned before, materials and supplies is going up because of the adoption. Something that Mitzi would like for me to note is that though we are mandated to have this adoption, it does not cover, obviously, the expense of the adoption through our categoricals. PICO is slated to go a little higher for charters next year, but that's just a flow through. Also in the projection, as mentioned before, food service is going to be, we're anticipating having to continue to help them until things return to normal. So we have another transfer in for them for next year. So in the end, something that we have also budgeted is the CARES, the ESSER 2. As you know, the one that was for this year was a little over $5 million. We've been told that next year will be about 4 times the amount. So we've budgeted about $20 million into next year's to help us be able to offset costs with the curriculum adoption, with the food service, and with obviously the COVID expenses that we continue to occur. Even though we have 100 vacancies, there's a shortage of substitutes. So we've had to basically, teachers are filling in and having to do it on their planning periods. So it is definitely a tough situation out there. So with all that being said, the zero-based budgeting exercise that we did for the departments, we're finished with all of them. And that resulted in almost $1 million reduction for expenditures for next year for departments. And when we send out the staffing allocations to all of the cost centers, that's when they'll have an opportunity to waiver, maybe purchase units with their own, the schools with their own add-on FTE money, or make different decisions based upon their allocations and what they think their needs are. The end leaves us with an ending financial condition ratio of 8.18 in level funding and 10.58 in the governor's budget. Something that's going to be, or has been put into place, new this year by Dr. Asplin, is called our staffing committee. And basically what that is typically what the district has always done at the 5-day count is when we true up our instructional vacancies and get things aligned. Well, because we're dealing with unknown times, he's wanting us to move forward where we're actually moving in real time. So basically it's a collective cross-functional team and everybody's involved, and basically there's going to be, as positions become available, enrollment's going to be run out of the system in real time to determine whether or not we can actually post that position or whether we need to hold it. So that basically on first day, schools will be staffed appropriately and schools can actually move forward with hiring people even if it wasn't in their projection. Does anyone have any questions?
What did you say the FRS increase was going to be? Do you know at a percentage that they're asking across the state and then what it's costing us?
It's 8.2% is the increase. I don't have the exact number of what it's going to end up costing us. I can do that.
Yeah, I think that's something we're definitely going to have our lobbyists, because we found out that the FRS is done in the Government Affairs Committee, and, you know, in the over in education appropriations, they don't even know that we're being charged this. So I need to make sure that we have those numbers and make sure that we let our legislators know that when they're giving us more money, their other committee is taking it away from us.
Right.
And we paid a big amount last year.
It was 18% increase last year. So,
and that was supposed to cover a lot of ills. So coming back again with this is not a good surprise.
yeah. I'm not surprised though, because again, just as we saw a reduction in our interest income, I'm sure the Florida retirement system is not seeing the gains that they were anticipating, which is probably the reason for the request at the percentage it is.
Mr. Edwards?
Thank you. To the food service transfer, 1.6 million, how much of that 1.6 is salary and benefits? I know you said it was, to accommodate an excess of staff at this time until we get back to normal, but how much of that 1.6 is salary and bennies?
I need to pull that up. I don't have that right in front of me, but that's just the net of it. But I have the information, so I can look for that.
We can find for you what the percentage of food and nutrition services salary and benefits is to their total cost, but it's pretty high. It's pretty labor intensive, but they have.
I would assume it's the bulk of it. And you also say that there's going to be a transfer for next year. Is it going to be around the same amount of money?
That's what we have currently in the budget, is the same amount of money.
Okay, and along the lines of when you're talking about staffing and only looking at refilling positions when absolutely necessary in real time, do we have an understanding of, and I hear that it's hard to ramp up when kids come back and all those kinds of things. So I'm very sensitive to that piece of it, but I just want to know what the break-even point would be. In other words, how many students have to return in order for us to be, and I know, and we've had this conversation, food service is never flush, so I get that, but just to kind of give me a sense of what normal would look like.
Okay, sure.
And I don't need it today, but I went to a finance forum. You're in trouble.
Oh, boy. So yes, I think right now, because everyone is eating for free, so they're getting their meal reimbursements, and of course there's a delay in that. So, we may have to give them money, but then we get flush back again. So at the end of the year, we're hoping it's, we're saying conservatively, we think that may be the amount. We're hoping it won't be that much, but again, it's important, especially if they don't renew this availability for everyone to eat for free, that those who do need to eat on a free or reduced lunch are applying appropriately for that benefit to make sure we're okay for next year.
And again, I'm not really looking to rock that boat. I just want to understand what normal looks like. I know everyone's kind of, or across the state, we're missing students. So I just want to kind of figure out when it looks normal.
Okay.
I think following up on that too, I mean, we fed a lot. I mean, it wasn't just in school. We were there all summer. We were putting all this dollars in, but we were getting some of that back and all of that. I mean, maybe a more detailed explanation of how that food services worked and how much it cost us and how much we got back, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that for sure. We can let you know. She knows exactly how many meals she served, and we know exactly how much revenue's been generated. So what we are not seeing is a lot of sales revenues, a lot of, purchase meals because they're free. So, yeah, we'll still have to figure it out. But I know that she had been running in a deficit for a number of years to spend down her fund balance because it had built up so high, which was purposeful. And now it's,
And we haven't raised the price of meals.
Correct.
Forever.
And we actually
now's not the time.
we did it for this year. I think with the 2021 budget, we had actually included an increase in prices, but since the meals are free, we're not obviously seeing that revenue. So,
okay, Ms. Rose.
Thank you. Did I hear you correctly that there's the potential to cut 30 staff positions in the upcoming school year?
Yes, ma'am.
And I understand and appreciate that Dr. Asplin has a committee as postings occur. Is there any thoughts on a priority as schools start to draft budgets on the impact of our mental health needs, one, and two, instruction and direct impact on schools and in classrooms, and particularly students that are in our achievement gap? That's a big piece. When I hear 30 positions being cut, what is the approach to that as budgets are being drafted.
So the units are oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Asplin.
All right, let me just answer that somewhat, then I'll turn it over to you, Mitzi.
Sure.
Yeah, one thing that we're talking about here are your general formula type staffing situations where, you know, for instance, elementary is 18-to-1, middle school is 22-to-1, so on and so forth. Making sure that we have enough teachers to cover those students, no matter what school you're in. And one thing I noticed, or we noticed last year was when we were having to cut back those 34 positions, the staffing was based not only on the projections at the beginning of the year, but also on what we thought it was going to look like in October. And we can't staff on what we think might happen, in my opinion. We can't do that and staff what we think might happen in October. I think it's much better if before the summer, when principals are creating their master schedules and so forth, if they have the staffing that they need to cover the number of students they have, and then on top of that, you're going to layer the Title I, and you're going to layer the other areas, for instance, in ESE, where we might need additional staff. But that initial budget, that initial projection needs to be based on the correct ratio and making sure that we're not overstaffing from the very beginning. And then, as we move into the summer, as principals say they have greater needs and they can show more students, or they show needs of students who are maybe ESE students or Title I needs, we can come back as a committee, a staffing committee, and talk through that to then determine if and what the principal might need. Totally agree with the principal, but at least it won't be on the front end to where then we're having to release people on the back end. We're doing it on the front end to make sure we haven't overstaffed, and then we can always layer on as needed. Now the problem there is you might miss out on those great teachers who might be hired by other people during the summer, like in June or July, because now all of a sudden we've determined you need another teacher, but some of these other teachers have already picked up jobs in other areas. So I know the principals would like to pick up teachers, really great teachers on the front end as much as possible, but I hate to hire them and overstaff, and that's really what this was all about.
So what you're saying is that there's going to be money in reserve to meet individual needs instructionally in schools. I'm not sure what.
Yes, so that initial staffing would not be Title I staffing, for instance. Title I layer would be laid upon that. So those Title I schools would then get additional staffing for those needs. But that initial staffing based on projections, we're going to base them on the real-time projections, and then layer on these other special needs as we know we need to do.
Which is basically Title I, you're saying?
Which is basically Title I, and there's other ESE situations, might have a one-on-one situation, so on, and grant that. But I'd rather do that on the back end and talk to the principals about their needs on the back end of that than to just give too many teachers and have to backtrack that. And that's what happened.
I understand. So is there a percentage cut of every department in school, or you're solely waiting to see what you're getting in to meet the numbers ratio?
Yeah, there's not a percentage cut for the schools. The 5% cut that we were looking at was for departments throughout. With the schools, it's truly determined by your school A, you have so many students and so many grade levels, you have to meet class size amendment. And so how many teachers is that going to take for you? Let's start there, let's build our master schedule, and then we'll take a look and see if you need more from that point.
I understand.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. No, well, thank you for all of this. I know it's always a moving target. I had similar questions to Mrs. Rose, and I guess since a lot of us highlighted there, I just wanted to know more about the staffing committee. I know you addressed that, but historically, do we overstaff? I feel like a lot of, okay. So historically, we have overstaffed and we have excess, and then they're surplused over.
We have, normally at the 5-day count is what they call it.
Right.
If schools have not seen or do not have the enrollment, or we don't anticipate that they will have the enrollment, then they will lose teaching units. We have others that may have higher enrollment and they'll gain teaching units. So there's always a mini staffing that occurs pretty much the first week of September on or around, and then we move the teachers around. But again, that's based on what we hope we'll have in October. So if those students don't come to fruition, those schools are overstaffed. And it stays that way for the whole year.
Understood. I believed historically that a lot of times there would be a concern of, I don't want to overstaff, and there would actually be more of a holding back on those positions. So that's contradictory. That's why I'm asking.
We do have principals who are, I'm not seeing these kids that I thought I was going to have coming into kindergarten, or, you know, my 9th grade's not looking as high as I thought it was going to be, and they will hold units themselves. So when it comes to us having this meeting for the 5-day count, most times the principals have held back a unit and not staffed a position. So when they lose it, it's a no harm, no foul kind of situation. So usually we're okay that way. I think at this particular point, Dr. Asplin comes from a history where they staffed, once you show you have the enrollment, then you get a unit. And so we're going to implement that.
Okay. And then to Mr. Edwards' point as well, I think the food nutrition, if you can send that to us and break it down, I just think it's helpful to get a sense of that. And the other one I had on the instructional materials, you're saying we're spending $4 million in addition to what we had projected?
In addition to the $3 million we received, yes, the implementation of the ELA. So remember, we have all new standards.
Correct.
Which requires us to have new curriculum and new instructional materials. So whenever you implement all new standards, you have new instructional materials. So the adoption for ELA is going to be about $7.5 million, and we get about $3.5 million in instructional materials for the entire district. So we'll have to, the general fund will need to kick in to cover the additional cost, and next year is math. And so we have, you know, kind of the same situation. It's a little bit less expensive, so it's like $3.5 million for a total of around $7 million. So the adoptions are incredibly expensive.
And we have them timed out, right? So we know when they're going, but just because of the new standards.
But it's new standards that are the cause this time. Am I correct?
Didn't they used to have instructional materials as a categorical, and now is it folded in?
It's still a categorical,
But they don't
but it
give us
used to be below the line with class size, 100% funded by the state. They moved it up into the funding formula along with transportation and lead teacher funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of liked it better when
When it was
actually point it
100%
out
by the
and
state
see.
instead of 90% local, but yeah.
Okay. I'm just looking at the time, and we have a time certain of 1:30 to go on to item 4, and I know that the progress monitoring is going to take any time. Not that we want to hurry you. I
we're
know
fine.
you'll be back next month.
I'm here all the time.
Or if anybody has any burning questions, we'll ask. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you
and,
so much.
I'll work on the food and nutrition stuff and have that sent over to you guys, okay?
Thank you.
And we will see you next month.
Thank you, Krista.
Well, and have fun as you're working on that cone of uncertainty.
All right. Our next item is our progress monitoring data update. We have Kelly Ellington, Sue Meckler, and Catherine Kokoza who will be here with us. We also have Steve Cantis, and we have Chris Renoff here, and Dr. Kingsley is here as well for whatever questions might come up during this time. Remember, our progress monitor right now is really our iReady data and our Achieve 3000 data. And we took the first test, or our students took the first test back in September. And then this information is the growth that's shown after taking the second test. Remember, we also gave the second test right before the winter break. So they have from September through December before they took the second test so that we could look at the growth and help us inform instruction with this progress monitor. One thing I do want to bring to note is, and I know there was something in the newspaper today, but in comparing last year to this year, I'm not sure that's a great idea. And the reason is because of a few things, and this is not to be defensive, this is just to give facts. Our time frame this year between test 1 and test 2 was 3 to 6 weeks shorter than normal. Normally, we would give our progress monitoring tests around mid-August, and then the second one would be at the end of December or mid-December. This year, as you know, we weren't able to give the first test till we were well into September. And so there was a good month of instruction that did not occur as it did last year before the second progress monitor was given. So, remember, progress monitoring is all about growth. It's not about the final number of where you are this year compared to last year. It's about how much did we grow. And of course, we want our students to grow as much as possible. But I just wanted to bring that up so you could put a comparison in place and understand that there was a month less time of instruction. So it doesn't mean our students aren't growing. It's just if we had given the second test a month after we gave it, you probably see higher numbers on here than you already see. What this does, though, it does give us great information to inform instruction. And that's what this is all about, being able to get this out to the schools, give it to the teachers so that they can create, their activities, their lessons, and their small groups as they move forward. The other thing I wanted you to take note of is, this year was like no other. Teachers are concurrently teaching. They have students online, they have students in front of them. We also, besides our remote students, we have many students taking virtual school. So it is a different year, and our teachers have been very frustrated just trying to figure out this new instructional delivery method. We also have, besides that, we've had many substitutes and many classes that didn't even have substitutes this year because so many people were either taking leaves or taking off. And so, again, not excuses, just to say these are real facts this year that occurred. And I think after, looking at this data and looking at the growth, definitely, we're never where we want to be. We want to always be better than we are. We always want to improve. We always want to move forward. But I have to say, I really think our teachers have done an amazing job this first semester just to have the growth that they've had based on everything that has been going on. And they will use this data here to inform their instruction as they move forward. I guarantee you they will do that. And we've been talking with the schools. The principals have been talking with their teachers in their professional learning communities, looking at this data and drilling down to the individual student data to personalize the instruction the best they can as they move forward. So again, this is progress monitoring data. It's to help us inform instruction. It's not the FSA where it's like an autopsy. What did we do? How did we do? This is about helping us along the way. So I don't want to take any more time than that, but I just wanted to lay that out there just so everybody understood what this really is. So
I want
yes,
to
ma'am.
thank you for saying that up front.
Okay.
He had a discussion with me earlier that I'm sure all of us would have been saying too. What? How are half of our kids not working, below grade level and all of this? And so, and I would think we all have those concerns.
Yeah.
And by you answering them up front,
right.
I hope we all listened to what he was saying and that we're not asking those same questions so that, those are those answers. We've got some,
That's right.
on that. We've got a short time. I'd like you to do the whole presentation. Hopefully you will be done in 10 minutes, no longer than, so that we will have maybe 3 minutes per member to have a discussion back and forth because we have to finish at 1:30.
And remember, at the end of the school year last year, we were completely remote for the last 2 months. So there was quite a bit of a slide coming into this year. Mm-hmm. So the first test that they took prior to March was going to be lower anyway. So anyway, with all that said, I'll go ahead and who's going to speak first?
I think I'm going to
Ms.
go
Ellington?
first. Hopefully
Yes.
my mic is on. Could we have the PowerPoint too showing? Hopefully. Thank you. I think this first slide is really about what you just talked about, Dr. Asplund. So thank you for setting the context for us and showing just that window of time did have an impact. And I'll get back to that when I get to the slide on our some of our intentional targeted response too, of another reason why we did that. The first slide is the elementary mathematics, which, as you can see, the comparison between AP1 and AP2 this year. And when you look at the colored boxes in the middle, those small boxes, it does show that from AP1 to AP2, there was growth in the greens, which is the early and mid and above level, and the decreases in the students 1, 2, and 3 grade levels below. Again, compared to last year, not as much as we'd want to see, and just in general, not as much. So we have a lot of work to do, but given all the parameters we're working with, we were pleased that from AP1 to AP2 with that shorter window, there were those increases. And the next slide just shows the same thing, but by grade level, by the 6 grade levels broken out. And again, you see when you just look across at the greens, the winter, there are definitely more students in the early, mid, and above grade level, and less, we always say we want more greens and less reds. The yellow band, just to remember that yellow band is a wide range. So the upper end of that yellow band, they're not as in dire straits as at the lower end of that band. So when we break that down for schools by class data and student data, we can find the students in the upper ends of the yellow too, so that there's not as severe circumstances there for those students. But that's drilling down for the schools individually. Then the next slide is reading. Again, we see the increases in the early, mid, and above level. And the reds and the yellow went down a little bit from AP1 to AP2. When you look at the small red percentages, there's the difference, which we think the main impact is that calendar, but obviously the other challenging circumstances we find ourselves in have an impact. And the next slide is by grade level again for reading. I'm kind of going through these fast because I think you already saw them, and we really wanted to talk about this next slide. So what are we doing about it? How can we help schools? And so Mr. Renoff, myself, and our elementary curriculum and instruction specialists, our team, we're providing support to the schools. One of the things is this personalized data review, strategic support that we're providing, where we're meeting with principals, school leaders, and their leadership team, analyzing their specific school data by grade level, by classroom, and talking about action steps. What can they do and how can they move forward? Then when Mr. Renoff has his principals meetings, there's time for collaboration and sharing among the principals for what's working in their schools, best practices. We have our math specialist meeting with math team leaders once a month after school to look at that data and look at the best practices there. And we also meet with grade level teams or PLCs on those new resources from iReady. We talked last time about the prerequisite report and the scaffolding for comprehension report. Our teachers still have access to the daily Blackboard content and the lessons that are there, which are aligned to the standards, and also link in those iReady resources. And this last bullet is what I said I would get back to. That calendar decision, we could have had the AP2 in January, but we intentionally made the decision to keep it in December so that we would have time to respond. So coming back in January, day one, their teachers are able to respond to that instruction. And our AP3 is moved up because usually we don't have time to respond after AP3, but we moved it so we'd have that response time too. So we're excited about that for schools to do that. And I think we're going on to middle. Lickety split.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so if we move on to page 9 or slide 9, the middle school mathematics. The one thing I want to point out to you is that this data does not include our algebra and geometry students, which are our highest achieving mathematics students. I also want to make a note that we have enrolled over 200 more students in algebra and geometry this year than in prior years. So that does change the number of students that you're seeing in this data. The other thing is iReady does not advance a student to the next level in mathematics unless they have closed the gap in all domains. So one of the things we think in mathematics is, depending on the specific strand or domain that the teacher is teaching, that's when some of those gaps are closed for those students. Moving on then by grade levels, 6, 7, and 8. Again, in 7th grade, we have 428 students that are enrolled in algebra, so those students are taken out of the 7th grade data. And in 8th grade, we have nearly 2,000 students in algebra and geometry combined. When we look at red, yellow, and green, we do see things moving in the right direction in that the red numbers are decreasing at each grade level. Yellow decreasing. We do have an increase in yellow at grade 8, which is in the positive direction, showing less in red, more in yellow. And then in green, an increase in each of the levels. Next, we move on to reading. Reading is one of the areas that you see is more flatlined. What I need you to understand specifically regarding the reading data, if you look at fall in the dark red, 17%, and you see 17% in the dark red in winter, please know that does not mean students are not making growth. What that means is that 46% of the students in that band are making growth. It just means that they are still 3 or more grade levels below. So 46% of the students have moved, for example, from grade 3 to grade 4 or grade 5. But if they're an 8th grader, they're still 3 levels below. But it is not to say that we are flat and no students are moving. 46% of them are showing advancement in or a change of level within that band. Next, you see by grade level also, 6, 7, and 8, very similar to what Kelly just shared. And again, the green showing some growth upwards, yellow, slight declines, red, again, the flat line area, but those students are moving as I just explained. So if we go on to our intentional and targeted support, the one thing that I added after the fact was what I found very powerful was the discussion we had with our principals and our assistant principals, because we really dug into the data by schools, and we had those schools share with each other what's working at your school, what are your challenges, how are you overcoming those challenges, and we had some great discussions and great takeaways, and that leads to collaboration not only within the school but across schools to share what's working. We have prioritized our data chats, specifically targeting instruction and goal setting for those students who are showing 0 or little growth. Teachers know how to adjust the instructional pathways of those students to make sure that they are passing their lessons within the personalized instruction. And we are goal setting with the students. So the students take ownership of their data, and we are monitoring that weekly. The more frequently we can monitor and have students seeing that growth, the more likely they are to continue to be motivated to do that. Our monthly standards mastery in ELA and mathematics has led to scaffolded data-driven interventions. Those are grade level assessments. So how do we support our most struggling students? We scaffold that learning for them to bring them up to grade level. 2 of our program specialists, mathematics and ELA, also created a Blackboard course for our teachers to help them understand how to scaffold those interventions. It's an 8-hour course. Teachers can participate on their own, at home, on weekends, whenever they'd like, to help with their learning and professional growth in that area. We also have teacher-assigned lessons, which are really important. So if I'm teaching a specific skill or strategy in my classroom, I can then assign lessons to the students to reinforce that learning in that personalized pathway. I think I mentioned to you before that we do have our Focus 5 low-hanging fruit literacy strategies, which we are also embedding not only in ELA and ILA, but also in science, social studies, and mathematics. And then the motivation or SEL side of the house is really important for our middle school students. And the schools were sharing the various ways they're recognizing students, and that's for all students. How the remote students are being recognized with personal notes sent home in the mail, phone calls, additional recognition for them, and tangible rewards to make them part of this process as well as they do for the students in face-to-face. Thank you. Catherine?
All right, the next 2 slides will provide a mid-year update for high school students who are taking intensive language arts, also commonly referred to as ILA.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Sure. As a reminder, students who are taking intensive language arts scored a level 1 or a level 2 on the previous year's FSA. In this case, though, it's 2 prior years. This slide that's in front of you gives you an indication of Lexile, and for those of you who don't know, a Lexile is a measure of a student's reading ability level. There has been an average gain of 40 Lexiles since the pretest was given at the beginning of the school year. To dig in a little more, the expected average growth for this group of students from the beginning of the year to mid-year is 25. That is, so we are coming in approximately 15 lexiles above that. As we continue to the next slide, and we look across all of our grade levels at the high school, we see that continuous growth happening. And if you want to go to the next one. So at the high school, we too have also focused on that PLC support, and our teachers continue to provide whole group and small group instruction focused on comprehension and vocabulary, which are the two most common areas of deficit at the high school, but they also pull small group to build skills when needed, and those skills would look at fluency, phonics, and phonemic awareness in some extreme cases. We usually pull in care and Swiss teams if we're at that level. Additionally, our teachers are working really hard to promote fidelity. They're coming up with school-wide approaches to incentivize students keeping on track with their learning, as well as scoring high scores on their first-time attempts. At grades 11 and 12, our focus will shift into ACT and SAT support, because the ACT and SAT can be used as that concordant score to meet graduation requirements.
Put the microphone. Okay. Or come closer.
Okay, so this next slide is just reminding us that we'd like to show you a couple of examples if we got this about.
I can't hear you.
It's on.
Just come closer to it.
Okay,
There you
we
go.
All right, maybe I need to hold it then. Okay, because I don't want to bend over the whole time. So we just want to, if we can just take a couple of more minutes, we wanted to highlight a couple of the incredible resources that our teachers have access to. At the elementary level, I just wanted to show you quickly an example of at the IFGs, the instructional focus guides that our teachers have that they can pull resources from and guide their instruction and planning. I just pulled up the 5th grade ELA, and as you can see, there's all different kinds of resources in here where they can click on writing resources, striving reader resources, and also remote learning support. So when they click there, they have lots of ideas, especially connected to iReady, and then other virtual pieces that will help our at-home learners, our remote learners. Wanted to show you just briefly, if we look at a 3rd grade class, for example, and we go to math, and let's go to math unit 5 because that's where we are now, and I believe we're in week 2. Yep, there we are, President's Day. So here's today, actually, the curriculum that teachers can access today, and always the number talk and problem of the day. This is for every grade level at elementary. The questions to help with mathematical discourse, the learning intentions and success criteria in there, all kinds of activities, plus formative assessments, there are exit tickets, and virtual resources for our remote learners. This is just one tiny example of what is in this Blackboard course, including they can go to the math GPS or IFG, where everything is linked. It gives the teachers the overall unit plan, the standards it's aligned to, all the links to the resources, including the iReady resources, how students should respond and so forth. And the prerequisite, this is a lengthy document, so the prerequisite reports are towards the end. I think that's my minute and a half or whatever. So there are more, but we just wanted to show you a glimpse of those incredible resources that teachers have that are aligned to the standards and utilize the iReady resources. So, Sue, you're up.
Sure. So I was asked to give you a glimpse into an intensive language arts classroom at the middle school level. And so I wanted to welcome you to a grade 6 intensive language arts class. Today, this group of concurrent learners are working on decoding multisyllabic words with automaticity. It is this critical work in automaticity that frees the students up to focus on comprehension, which is the ultimate goal of reading. The multisyllabic vocabulary words associated with this informational text they are reading, which is called Plants, Essentials for Ecosystems, include the words existence, continuously, recombine, and structural. In today's lesson, the teacher reads the words aloud. In-class students write the words in their vocabulary notebooks, while remote students record their answers using a new digital tool called Nearpod. This tool allows the teacher to see each remote student's answers and save their work. When correct answers are shared, the teacher has various buttons on the active panel that make different celebratory sounds. The first student chooses loud applause and is rewarded with spirited clapping. With a few minutes left in class, the teacher quickly distributes bingo cards with the words they've been studying. As she calls out the words, the students identify the printed words on their cards. Bingo, another successful class comes to a close. This is a quick snapshot in the time of a middle school ILA class. Thank you.
And to wrap up today, we thought we would bring the authentic voice of the work of a PLC. We often mention that what a key role the PLC plays in student progress and achievement. Today, with the help of the high school English and reading program specialist, Linda Copeland, we will take a moment to hear from two amazing Northport High School ILA teachers and PLC collaborators, David Menino and Catherine Barrios. You will hear them talk about the data they consider and the importance of their team in supporting their individual work.
And can we have the video displayed, please? Before I start it, since it's very brief. Okay.
Hi, Catherine and David.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for having us on to share. Our PLC uses data to assist our students by sharing common trends, especially for students that may have had one of us in previous years. Sometimes they just have not been able to master some of the standards, so they will have another teacher within our PLC in another year, and that's really helpful to us because we can compare the trends from their FSA data. And we also anticipate the new data from the APM will also be extremely valuable for targeted interventions. We also think it's important to share behavior data with our team for the same reasons I just mentioned. One of us may have some insight on why a particular student acts the way they do or what they struggle with academically or personally, and that definitely helps us in planning academic as well as behavioral interventions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Some of the
David, did you wanna
measurables we
add?
discuss in our data chats include, but are not limited to, discussing any anomalies or anything unusual that needs to be addressed for any of the students and why that could be. It really helps when one of us has the student or has had the student in a previous year, like Catherine had mentioned. If we're looking at a specific assessment, like the APM, we try to compare areas that have a low response rate or were left blank, or just difficult questions that contain concepts that are difficult for students in order to focus on direct and individual instruction interventions tailored to those specific domains or needs for the students. We also try to discuss why these were left blank or possibilities for improvements, though especially as a reminder to our students that using their strategies like process and elimination are so key, and any answer is better than a blank one. And we also use data from Achieve to help our students establish goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely for each domain in question, and specific skills, that students are struggling with so that they can identify what strands or what stands in the way of the goal, of their goal, and how we can help get them to overcome learning struggles through targeted interventions.
Great.
All of us think it's so incredibly important to communicate as a team, and we're just so lucky to have, such an awesome PLC group.
And you are the ILA team at Northport High School. And I know you mentioned you use several sources of data. You use the APM, which is a new data source that we've been using that's offered through the state, and Achieve 3000, which is our data we use in ILA. Can you tell us how often you refer to the data for Achieve 3000?
We use it on a weekly basis in our PLCs.
Great. Wonderful.
As I'm grading, and just notice my own trends within my own students, and then bring it back to my PLC, especially, again, like I mentioned, when we have had students we've shared over the years, or just common trends in general that, for specific classes or even times a day, like, okay, why are they specifically struggling, or maybe an article that we shared together. And that's really been helpful as well, too, with, 10th grade versus 9th grade, and, just targeted areas of concern.
Perfect. Well, I thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with me some of how you all utilize your PLC at Northport High School.
You're welcome.
So we've left you with 10 minutes. We tried to cut it down just a little bit for you, but we'd love to answer some questions.
Yeah, we're running tight. How are we connecting at 1:30 with Mr. LaFace?
Via Zoom. Via Zoom.
He's going to be there on Zoom. You know, maybe we'll run this a little and use some of our member comments, but try to keep our comments short and to the point. And maybe we'll bring these people back to, maybe not them, but maybe the directors to talk more. Ms. Rose?
Yes, just quickly, I want to say how important the work is that your departments are doing. I know firsthand it has an incredible impact, and the specialist teachers that you have working with you and the work you're doing in schools with teachers is insurmountable, and I think the public really needs to be aware of how important it is what you're doing. And when I look at the middle school reading data, I'm just looking for a clarification if the algebra and geometry students take the reading assessment, because your numbers are showing the same for the eighth grade group. So that's what confused me. So obviously the reading middle school students was included all of our students, that whether they're in algebra or general math.
So if you're referencing the N number,
it says, it shows 6th grade 2,153, 7th grade 1,911, 8th grade 781. I assume those were student numbers, perhaps not.
yes, you're exactly right. We need to go back and look at that.
That's
because
okay, I just needed the clarification
the eighth
with
grade
that.
should include the all students.
Yeah, thank you
Yes,
for that.
absolutely.
And then just lastly, I know that iReady provides a further breakdown than what we're being presented, and in particular, the prediction scores for the FSA, and potentially comparisons, not to last year, because I fully agree with what Dr. Aspelin was saying, but comparisons to other districts, because I think with again, agreeing that we have incredible teachers, and even with the challenges, we have high quality staff and curriculum support, and I would be very interested in having a copy of that breakdown. I know iReady puts it in simple terms that we've requested as a district that is a little deeper information, so may I have that as a board member?
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
and well done. Thank you for the work that you take to put into these presentations.
So just one of the things to note, iReady is really not doing a prediction any longer as far as prediction aligned to FSA. Obviously, based on where students are performing, we can make a good guess of that. And then regarding comparison to other districts or nationally, one of the things we found were so many districts are even further behind than we were, that they weren't even going to get to their AP2 data till late January, early February, because they started so incredibly late. So there wasn't a good comparison this particular calendar year.
And I think the things that you've said, Mrs. Meckler, are actually things that make us, it shows how hard our teachers are working and our staff is working. And if those could be, you know, I don't want any extra work on you, because I think your focus is in our schools in the classroom. But if we could get what data that you have, I would certainly appreciate it. And if there is any comparisons, but no extra work, no putting anything together, what you already have. And I'm disappointed they're not doing the prediction score any longer, but whatever you have would be appreciated. And again, no extra work.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we all would like to hear that, but obviously if they don't do that. Ms. Ziegler?
Thank you, and thank you for everything you're doing, and I will echo what she said, and I apologize that we have to rush, because in my mind this is the most important thing that we do, and so I appreciate you guys having to go through it so fast, because I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes to even just present this. So the one quick thing, and we can dive in later, but is ultimately to better understand. I know one of the things that we were looking at last time was in person versus out of person, and I know that we didn't see a major change. Is that something that to Mrs. Rose's point, I don't want to create more work, but if that's an easy chart, because I think we're growing towards more in-person brick and mortar. We were at 80-20, now we're probably, what, 90?
84.
84, okay. So I don't know if that's changed or not, but my bigger thing, and I think that as I look through this, is I know this has led to help guide us and give us a sense. So where is that growth happening at every single area? I mean, how many of those students in each tier are really truly illustrating growth? I think you mentioned 46%, but I don't know if that's something that can be shown to us. And the other thing is that I know we do this at the school level and through the PLCs, as you mentioned, but God, I feel like I'm talking fast, and I normally always talk fast. So, but is really, Mrs. Goodwin mentioned this too, is as we look at this as a district, and this is not immediate, but just diving in a little bit deeper, are these students from our district, or are they from other, have they come in? We're seeing an influx of people moving to Florida. So, I mean, just to better understand how we can help support them, and also from a resource standpoint, are they ESOL, or they ESC? I mean, there are a number of things. I know all you guys look at that. I just think from a macro level, if there was any way, maybe somewhat to what Mrs. Rose was saying.
And there are reports that would take us further without them having to produce any data that would lead us to have a deeper knowledge and potentially further questions.
Right, and the goal is ultimately to support our students, but support staff to get whatever resources you guys need to ensure we can get them across the line. So there's so much more, but I will leave it at that.
I really talked about starting our meeting at 11 instead of 12, because I thought this was going to take longer, or 10, so we'd have time for lunch. And but I think we will come back to this with our district executive directors to talk more, not so much how you got to the numbers, but what you're going to do about them is what we want to know about, I believe. Mr. Edwards?
Thank you for your work. It's astounding. I think one of the other things that is still the elephant in the room, and I'd like to hopefully get it on a workshop agenda soon, mental health in our school district. I think that's an X factor that is not written up in what the data that we're looking at, and from my perspective, it's serious. So we have to have that on a workshop agenda. And I'm sorry that it seems like you're always running in place to show what you're doing and what you're doing and what you do that every day. You did it every day before there was a pandemic. And I'm sorry that it comes off as you have to justify, or you have to, and you do it every day. And I know that our teachers are doing it every day. And I know our parents at the schools know that you're doing it every day. But two things that I would rapidly throw in there. While you're showing us all the incredible things that you're doing, what do you need? What can we get for you? How can we rescue some of this? What are the tools that we can provide? And second, in what we talked about before, we had this conversation somewhere in some other workshop or board meeting, but in all of what you're trying to do to raise the scores, if there was some professional development that's available for parents that we could throw on the menu, that we can show that, because I know parents would, many of them would want to do whatever they could to help. You guys want to take it all on and put it on your shoulders, but it's a community, and we all want to help. So those are my notes, and I have a whole lot more, but we're out of time.
The next 1 month from now, we're going to be back on this subject, correct? I saw him writing it down, and I know we're going to talk about it.
We would love to talk about this all day long, actually, if you want to.
All right,
we're
Ms.
just
Goodwin?
trying to get it all in.
Well, I'm not a curriculum specialist, and I thank you all for all the work you do, and I know that it's hard work. How many students do we have that are dyslexic, and how do they fit with iReady? Because I get parents sending me information about this all the time, that they don't think iReady is good for their children because their children have dyslexia. So what do you see?
So we can get you specific numbers, but I will tell you we have specific interventions for those students who fall.
You don't need to do that now.
Okay.
Next is, I know that they're not forecasting how well that the FSA, that kids are going to do on the FSA, and I think that's good because I know the last time it didn't turn out so well for them. So I'm perfectly happy with that. And I'm not a big iReady fan. All of you know that. It's cost an awful lot of money and blah, blah, blah. So we know that. But what I want to know is our kindergarten kids. How many are we missing, and what are we going to do this next year? Because we're going to have kindergarten kids in the first grade.
Well, or they might be in kindergarten. We know there are 187 students who registered last year for kindergarten and then didn't come, and Krista even mentioned that number, 187. And then there may be another 100 or so that didn't register and didn't come. So we could be 200 to 400 students who should have been in kindergarten this past year and didn't come. So we've been working with principals on our plans to, as we register, as families come in and we register them, to get them in the appropriate space, in the appropriate spot. And our curriculum team has developed some screeners and some, that's not the word I want, but some screeners and some assessment pieces so that they can find out where the students are. Some parents will have homeschooled and some will have, provided some of that instruction. So we're going to have to probably a case-by-case basis. Of the 187, we have them broken down by school, so the schools already know who their 10 or 12 are. And that's going to be a case-by-case, working with the family, the principal, getting them in there. And then once they're in the right place, we'll be working with our teachers and providing those resources that they'll need to target that instruction, because if they are promoted to first grade, they are going to need a whole different set of strategies and skills and procedure, things for them, because they will not have been in school, just how to play school, how to do school. So we've been talking about that and meeting together, the curriculum team, principals, Mr. Renoff and me, and we're probably March is when we're going to roll out what all of those details are. But it's next year, really. This part, that's really about the registration piece and the best place.
And one final thing that you don't need to answer now, but is the parent piece. We're failing miserably. I talked to a couple of people in our community in this last week. I talked to them about, what can we do to help parents who are not computer literate, who may have a language barrier, who do not understand how we are teaching now. And so I think we need to be thinking of thoughtful things we can do to encourage parents. And sometimes that doesn't work so well for us, because I know when Department of Ed was here a month or so ago, we encouraged and invited all these parents in for a parent night, and it didn't turn out that they showed up.
Right.
So I don't know what we can do, but
we've been providing some things, and we had an iReady parent night even a couple weeks ago, and it's finding the best times for parents, I think, and we're still struggling with that.
You got a big job. You do a great job. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Ron LaFace and Megan are on the line.
Perfect timing.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Hi, Ron. We'll be with you in just a second.
Okay, perfect.
great.
We'll be on mute until you tell us.
Go ahead. I'll save my comments till after.
All right. Thank you to our curriculum team. Really appreciate it. I know that you work hard every single day. Thank you for all you're doing. All right, Ron, go ahead and unmute yourself, please, if you would. And I know that you all are on to talk about the legislative bills that are out there right now. I think Megan sent me 5 of them this morning, 5 that you'd like to just discuss and let everyone know where we are with these. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, yeah, no, that would be great. And thank you all for being interested in at least what the legislature is putting together to kick off the 2021 session. Just for a timing standpoint, we are in our last week of interim committee meetings. Our regular session will begin on March 2nd and then continue for 60 days. There has been a lot of work done since January 2021, probably less work than in normal years because of obviously the focus and the constraints that COVID has provided. The legislature has not been able to hold as many committee meetings, and certainly with no capital access by anybody from the public, really. It's kind of slowed down the process a little bit, but they are starting to get their sea legs and move some bills, and we're starting to see some proposals come to light and take shape. But a couple of bills that we wanted to just highlight for you. These are the I would call them the hottest bills at the moment, meaning that they have interest behind them, and they have movement both from the executive level and from the legislature. But the first one is a bill by Senator Berman. And it is a idea that Senator Berman, who's a Democrat from Palm Beach, came up with that it was based on a lot of feedback from parents because of COVID, that would allow a parent to retain a student and not progress to the next grade if the parent didn't feel the student was ready to move on. Certainly it comes from, an aspirational parental choice type aspect, because everybody is concerned about the COVID slide, and we're seeing, not pretty much statewide, even though Florida certainly got kids to educate a lot better than other states, certainly a COVID slide is occurring out there. But there are some issues that this raises, because sometimes there is disagreement between what a parent thinks is in the best interest of their student and what the school and the district feel based on where the student is from a learning threshold. And so today, it's not the parents, certainly interest is taken into account, but it's not the ultimate arbiter of whether the student is held back. Senator Berman, based on some feedback, has changed her bill in the first committee, because there was some other concern about parents wanting to hold their students back in high school just because of sports in order to get another year of playing high school sports. So she has limited the bill to K through 8. And there was also another concern raised by the superintendents that there are students that a parent might feel needs to be held back, but the school knows the student is ready to move on to the next grade. But if the student is held back, they will get bored with school, in the first month or two of the fall, and certainly want to progress back into their original grade level before they were retained. And so Senator Berman also added a provision in the bill that would say if a parent holds a student back, they're not eligible for mid-year promotion. I do think the bill still probably needs some work. I know that the High School Athletic Association is raising some concerns about student sports eligibility, where if a student's held back, say, in the 3rd grade and then retained under this bill again, then they wouldn't be able to be eligible for sport at high school. But Senator Berman is certainly open to listening to continued concerns about her bill, and she's trying to take them on into account. I will say, her heart is in the right place as to what she's trying to accomplish here. So I don't know if anybody's got any additional thoughts on that bill, and if not, I'll move on to the scholarship bill.
Move on. I see no questions.
Okay. So on the scholarship bill, we have a pretty expansive scholarship bill this year. We've all heard about these in the past and worked on them. This is probably one of the, I would say, bigger, most expansive scholarship bills we've seen in a while. The bill actually has made it through its first committee in the Senate Education Appropriations Committee. It will be, or Education Policy Committee. It will be in the Education Appropriations Committee this year. There currently is no House bill, but I know that the House is working internally on their version of the scholarship bill. But the basic bottom line is combines a number of current scholarships into 2 scholarships. So it combines the Gardner and McKay scholarships into a Gardner-McKay scholarship, and also combines the HOPE, the tax credit, and the current Family Empowerment Scholarship into a single Family Empowerment Scholarship. One of the big, I would call it kind of paradigm shifts that this bill does is instead of just being a traditional scholarship, it actually creates an education savings account, which would be similar to a checking account with a debit card, and it essentially puts 97% of the student's FTE into that account to be spent on child's education, whether that's to buy devices, whether that's to buy curriculum, whether that's to enroll the student in a private school, whether that's to pay for homeschooling of the student, whether it's to pay the parent to transport the student. All of those are eligible expenses. Even buying the student a prepaid college fund is an eligible expense that could be spent out of the education savings or checking account. There would be an oversight entity. Currently think of Step Up for Students as the entity that is doing many of these scholarships. So everybody assumes that they would be the entity overseeing these. They would have some requirements to oversee the expenditures, and also some requirements to make sure that the student is taking some sort of an assessment. It doesn't require, if a student goes to a private school, it doesn't require the student to take the Florida Standards Assessment. It just requires the school to offer the Florida Standards Assessment or a norm referenced assessment. and then it requires the parent to affirm that they had their student take the assessment. But outside of that, what those norm reference assessments are or how you compare them, there's no real oversight on that piece. And then also there is some, I would call it, lessening of annual oversight on the oversight entity, whereas the state kind of audits them once every year now. They would be audited once every 3 years. The bill has certainly received a lot of attention. I think it will get a lot more of attention. But it's just something that is really starting to get out there. We're starting to see some amendments to it, and if anybody has any feedback or issues that you'd like for us to pay special attention to on it, please let us know. The one thing that I've heard a little bit from some of the superintendents that they'd like to see is on the private school norm reference assessments. Making sure that maybe there is a list maybe of which assessments could be used to limit it a little bit, so that you can get maybe more apples comparison on how the students are doing, because there are a lot of norm reference tests. So from the superintendent's perspective, they're saying there's good ones, there's bad ones. So, maybe it would be a good idea to say, they have to take one of these tests and have some sort of a list on assessments that everybody agrees are valid and reliable assessments. But with that, would love to take any feedback that anybody has on that.
Dr. Asplin.
Yes, Ron, just out of curiosity, when a student arrives at let's just say a private school, a student arrives there with a scholarship, is that school allowed to just pick who they want, say, no, you can't come here, or yes, I want you to come here? And if so, should there be something in the bill that says, if someone shows up at your doorstep with a scholarship, you need to let them come to your school? Because I don't know if they pick and choose who they want, who they don't want, and so on and so forth. And especially a student that gets a scholarship thinking they're going to go to this great school, and all of a sudden they're turned away. Is that happening?
I do know that private schools are able to limit their enrollment, and they do not have to, in a different situation than, say, a charter school who, theoretically does need to kind of take everybody that applies within their charter. Private schools are able to limit their enrollment. I know they certainly can't discriminate against students, and but that is a concern, and some of the concern that's been expressed about this expansion is not the theories behind it, but there is concern that there's really not enough private schools today if there were to be, if everybody, if every voucher that was available under the way that the vouchers expand 1% a year to take the students that wanted to go to private schools, and may force students into more of a homeschool type environment, or trying to do pod learning. But a lot of that's unknown at this point. But to answer your question, I do not believe that the private schools have to accept everybody. If they accept the voucher, have to accept everybody that comes to them from the public schools with a scholarship.
They also can and do discriminate. We know of schools right here in Sarasota County that won't take LGBT students. It's against their, they're protected under religious umbrella or something like that. So they are allowed to discriminate if it's under the umbrella of religion. I don't know other instances. I only saw an article on one. I think I could spend the rest of the afternoon talking about this bill, but I won't. It concerns me that, here we have these legislators that are concerned, about a welfare mom giving her food stamps, and, that she doesn't know how to spend that money. But, when she surely should know what her kids need to eat, but we're going to give her $8,000 and let him make the decision on what schools they're going to go to, without having an understanding of how. And in these and they move. What if they've paid their money to the school and then they move someplace else? Or they decide that's not where they want to go? Or they've spent all their money and it's January and the kids, where this kid going to go to school? What protections are there in the bill about that?
That's a lot of the questions that people are raising. That there do seem to be some improvement that could be made to the bill to even begin to address those. And I would look at it where that issue comes up a lot is in the homeschool environment, because it does allow you to spend your education savings account on homeschooling. The way that works today is that you have to have an annual review to make sure that you're making adequate yearly progress, and that's performed by a teacher and then signed off on by the district. And then if you're not, you're basically on probation for a year. So in that situation alone, you could be homeschooled for 2 years without receiving any learning gains if somebody was not actively, pursuing your education, to your point. But and there are some questions that are being raised by different, communities who have traditionally supported scholarship bills because, of the focus of helping low-income students exit the public schools and maybe a more prestigious private school. They have the same concerns about the difference between, giving a voucher or a scholarship that can be endorsed over to the private school to cover tuition versus giving a checking account with a debit card, and making sure that money is spent on the child's education with some that there's not really a lot of oversight, at least to audit and make sure that all of those funds are being spent on an annual basis. So.
And just to chime in, everything that Ron said is 100% accurate. But just the functionality of the bill, the funds are dispersed quarterly. But to Ron's point, there's not a lot of oversight, particularly on the homeschool side. About essentially the parent can receive tuition for homeschooling the child, and so it's just very broad.
Yeah, I think the only kind of prior approval oversight on the savings account is to buy devices.
Yeah, digital devices have to be prior approved along with curriculum and internet service.
Right. But it doesn't limit how many devices you could buy a year or anything to that extent, at least in the bill.
Everything else, I think the language says it's a review on the back end, and then if a purchase was found to be ineligible, the organization who's overseeing just has to request that the parent refund it. But there's nothing else really specified in the bill.
Do homeschool parents receive any funding at this time?
No.
So, that would be adding quite a lot to who's going to be funded throughout the school district. We're looking at ESE requirements and having ESE students in a class that are not teaching ESE students at their grade level. And I'm looking at the McKay and the Gardner scholarships. Do they do anything in those schools to make sure that, when these kids graduate high school, that they've got a high school education behind them?
As far as I'm aware, the bill combines the two programs, and the only change that it really made substantively that I could tell was just that the McKay option to send your child to another public school within the district where there might be better services than your zone school, that's no longer an option under the bill. And so students in both the McKay and the Gardner scholarship programs would have to use their scholarships to go to a private school from here on out.
Or seek services outside of the district, which is, and that's one that we've certainly flagged and that we plan to speak to the sponsor about because currently you would have those students who may be seeking good, on a McKay scholarship, seeking services from the district that are working for them and would not be eligible any longer under this bill.
Well, I'd like you to maybe talk with somebody from DOE about students that would, in the regular districts, they go into access because it's not as robust of learning experience. But what happens when they're at these schools and they're not learning up to the grade level? I would just maybe perhaps ask that if you get a chance. Mr. Edwards is our next.
Speaking as a elected official for public school board, there's really nothing in this bill I can support. So I just look at it as an onslaught against public schools. And I put it in the same bucket as the fact that our teachers are not being offered vaccines, that the hold harmless looks like it's not going to be granted, more attack on public schools. So I just need to say, if there's anything that we can do as a school board that you need from us to fight this bill, I'm happy to answer that or to suggest that I'm willing to help in any way to fight it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ron, the next one.
Okay. Up next, we have House Bill 3, which is home book delivery for elementary school students. This bill is a priority of Speaker Sprowls, and it creates a program that will home deliver one book per month to students who are in grades K through 5, who are either low income or not reading at grade level. And so the focus of the bill is to try to promote literacy in early grades. School districts are not mandated to join the program, but they'll have the ability to opt in. But if you do choose to opt in, you're responsible for 50% of the program cost, with the other 50% being borne by a private entity that's going to fundraise and raise donations. Is one of the two that I wanted to talk about. And the second one is the COVID school accountability bill. On the Senate side, it's been sponsored by Senator Perry Thurston. And the bill would essentially just require districts to offer the FSA or to administer the FSA to all students, but for diagnostic purposes only. And it would kind of remove any sort of application that it would be used for school grades, the turnaround program, student retention, or teacher VAM scores, or any of the things that the FSA is currently tied to as far as student performance. And so that's something that I know has been on the district's legislative platform and is top of mind. We did speak with Chairman Gruters about this, and he does intend to hear the bill in his committee. The DOE, in a presentation to the Pandemics and Emergencies Committee in the Senate yesterday, did talk about the executive order that they released yesterday morning. The executive order does not suspend, the application of the FSA, but it does provide school districts with a longer time frame to give the test, essentially, to accommodate for COVID protocols and for the the difficulties that schools may have getting 95% of students back to the school to take the test in person. But we are closely monitoring this issue, and we know it's very important to the district to make sure that we understand what the FSA is truly going to be used for in this year, where we know there's been so many impacts to student outcomes because of COVID. So, any questions on those two pieces of legislation?
Shirley Brown here. I know that one of the things they use the FSA for is the best and the brightest giving money to teachers. There's no dollars in the budget for that this year, so they're not going to be using it for rewards. At least not according to the budget. They're using those dollars instead for raising teacher salaries across the board.
That's correct. Yes, I believe the Best and Brightest program has been eliminated in law and replaced with the teacher salary categorical.
Well, so that's one good thing, that the tests are being used more for diagnostic ways and not to reward teachers. Ms. Goodwin?
I wanted to mention a couple of bills that I'd like to chat with you offline about, Megan. One is Ray Rod and Lee County's bill in the Senate 1180, which in essence would eventually terminate the salaries of school board members. Okay. I don't know if that has a companion bill in the House. And the other bill I was just told about on Friday, and it's I think it's 1214, but I'm going to have to check. I found out that Senator Gruters is sponsoring a bill that would take low-income, I think, housing. It's very confusing. It's a one-pager. Off the tax rolls and would cut into revenue about $350 million, which could impact our local revenues from property tax. And it's written in a confusing manner, then you have to go over and really relate to statute to pick it up. But if you could do some research on that, it would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that legislation, so I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, and we have begun review of the first bill that you mentioned. It was just recently filed, and there is no House bill yet, and people are starting to get their hands around, the aspects behind that one on the school board salaries.
Interesting. I think Senator Rodriguez ran for school board first and was defeated before he ran for other offices. And I don't know what his logic is on this, but I find it to be offensive.
There's, Karen? Go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any movement? I know that Representative McFarland was looking at writing a bill on retired teachers and substitutes, and given we just had a presentation on that's one of our greatest challenges, has there been any information relative to that?
Yes, ma'am. She has filed the bill, and kind of with feedback from myself, Ron, from the school district. She's definitely appreciative of the community support. And I believe that Senator Gruters has the Senate companion. They have identical bills filed in the House and the Senate. And I did speak to her last week about that issue, and she is working with staff to answer any concerns that might still kind of be lingering from the last time that the bill or a similar piece of legislation made its way through the legislature. And so we're kind of standing ready to provide her with information as needed.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate you asking that question, just because, when we were asked to kind of join in here today for the workshop, we had a limited period of time of, 1:30 to 2. So we just kind of put down the bills that were moving, not really a comprehensive, these are also the bills that are priority bills that we're tracking, but we can, as we start to, maybe do more of these, we can certainly, make sure that we've got everything on our list.
Thank you. From my perspective, it's one of the most important, even that it was just cited as directly relating and impacting our student performance, which is my focus.
Yes, I'd like to have an update on that when you follow up on that. The other thing I'm looking at is, the FRS. There's a bill going through, and I understand it doesn't go through the Education Appropriations Committee. It just goes through General Government. Let the Education Appropriations and the Education Committee know the financial impact of that FRS bill and how it's going to affect school districts. They don't seem to talk to each other in that, and I think that's important. And I also believe that the governor included the old way that we allocate the required local effort to all of the property values, not just the new.
So first on the FRS, Ms. Brown, what I wanted to mention, and this is actually a little bit of good news, I'll call it half good news. Last year we had a increase in the FRS that was about $230 million to school districts that the state felt was the bare minimum that they could do to keep the bonding and rating agencies happy with the fiscal strength of the retirement fund. This year, because that increase, in order to get the fund into an actuarially sound position, they would need to do this for a couple more years of those same $230 million increases. And actually, over the summer, the budget estimators recommended and came to a consensus on that same increase. The Senate bill that actually got filed, which is a committee bill that, to your point, it doesn't go through the education silo, it goes to the general government silo. They actually only it cost on school districts by about half of that, I think it's $130 million. So instead of increasing the cost by $230 million, which is about $75 per student, they just did $130 million, and they're doing it under the guise of COVID. frankly. They're doing it under the look. COVID has affected everybody's budgets, and so we're going to try to ask a little bit less of school districts and other local governments on their contributions as they're trying to move that dollar figure back up. So that was a little bit of good news. We're trying to make sure that it holds, but we have been having that conversation with the education silo and the retirement silo.
Yeah, good. I think it's important for the education people to know how much that's costing us. So when they're talking about giving us more money, they deduct that amount. Karen, you have another comment?
I do. Thank you. Just one more piece on the Florida retirement system. Is it correct that the legislature is looking at retirement benefits for educators, for teachers? Is that something that's got movement?
Yeah, and I don't think it's limited for just teachers. They were effectively closing down the pension fund for new hires starting, when is it, July 1st or October? Sometime in the next year, I believe they completely closed down the pension, and everybody has to opt into the defined contribution plan. And along those lines, there's also a very I'd call it, I mean, it is a union busting bill that's also in the Senate that would require a number of provisions that affect the way that union membership operates. And so kind of if you want to look at it from the chess pieces on the board, you have a pension bill that closes down the pension fund. You have a union busting bill, and you also have a very expansive scholarship bill all going on at the same time.
I would I think it's important that we are focusing in on our ability to continue to be a high-performing district and grow our performance, and directly looking at teachers from a substitute standpoint, as well as if we're going to be looking at reducing their benefits in pension. We currently have, if I recall correctly, 100 vacancies instructionally. That's a major issue for us going forward that I would like to be able to follow closely, please.
Yeah, and another thing, if they shut down to new members, then there's nobody funding the program, so you're going to run into problems in the future because there won't be new dollars going in.
And to that point, the bill in the Senate that would close the pension plan to new entrants did get its first hearing. There were a lot of questions, there were questions from both Republicans and Democrats on the committee about what does that do? Like, what's the state's obligation if you do close the pension plan to new entrants? Do we have to fund this on the back end? What does it look like? And the sponsor of the bill, who is Chair Rodriguez, did say that there was going to be a financial analysis of what that would look like that's going to be available. I believe he said the first week of March, so the first week of session. So that'll be interesting to see how viable that really is once the numbers are put.
And perhaps if Ron is wearing a suit of armor, he could go in front of that committee and ask them to look at the general pensions that they give to elected officials. And I believe that, I know when I was elected to the legislature and they reduced the time that you can serve to 8 years, they reduce the amount of years that it takes to get tenured to allow you to get the pension to 8 years. And I think it might even be 6 right now for elected officials. So maybe what they can do is reduce some of those benefits they're giving out on some of those elected officials to help make it affordable again for the rest of the people. Perhaps.
That is definitely an issue that continues to get brought up, as does all of the special risk classes are two major cost drivers in the pension.
Okay. We have to cut off because they have to switch down the room to for the meeting now. Thank you, and I enjoy your updates that you send us, and we appreciate all you're doing for us, because it's not as easy to get there anymore. And even as our representatives in the School Board Association, we can't even get in there anymore. So we appreciate you being up there for us, and keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're right across the street from the Capitol, and we still can't get in there.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you guys. Appreciate the time.
All right, thank you.
before we go into other I had a comment to make on the review that we are having, because I looked at it and I too said, you know, we're looking at these numbers, but these numbers, you know, are children. And when I first looked at those 8th grade math numbers, I mean, to say that only, you know, and I looked at it, we got 3,500 8th graders and only 7%, 300 of them are at grade level. What are you doing? So to have that explanation that, you know, we've got algebra and geometry pulled out and that the time frame wasn't as much. But I'm glad to see, because I said, no, we need to find out who it is that's at grade level, not at grade level, why they're not, what we need to do, how we're going to do it, and when we're going to get it done. So I said, and I look at their plan and they say that they're doing that. And I want to make sure that it's not just the plan that they're doing and that we have many of our teachers doing it. I want to make sure that all of our teachers are doing it. And I want to hold our, you know, executive directors and our principals responsible. You know, if they're going to be giving a teacher highly effective, that highly effective teacher should be attending these professional developments. The highly effective teacher should be able to move these kids. And, you know, because we have to look at, okay, we've done all of this. So at the end of the year, you know, who's still down there at a level 1 and 2, and what didn't we do for those students? And hopefully that teacher or that school did everything. Because I know that, you know, there were some kids who had a substitute teacher all year or something like that. We need to find out why. And I think what we need to do is not that just the short meeting that we have. Let's use that whole day meeting that we have and look at with those executive directors to make sure that those things are happening and what are they doing in some of those, because we wanted to talk more about not just the numbers, but how is it working in the classroom, and also on the mental health issue. We'll be working on that at the next future board meeting. And I see Jane Goodwin has a comment.
Well, I would like to also talk about geometry and Algebra 1 in middle school, because I'm seeing some kids who have a feeling about that being somewhat of a status, shall we say, and who gets chosen and who's in those classes versus regular math classes. And I've heard a buzz for several years now among kids. And why are we accelerating these children? Is this a good thing for all to accelerate them that early to Algebra 1 and geometry? I know, Karen, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But, are they going to take 4 more years of math in high school? Some of them do, yes. I happen to have a grandchild who's doing just that. But I'd like to know more about that component, because there is some buzz among the kids about who does and who doesn't take those courses.
Bridget?
Thank you. Well, a couple of things, and actually I defer also to Mrs. Rose on this, just from something you say, and I appreciate this, is that not putting additional work on our staff just to do presentations, because at the end of the day, we want them to get to work and provide support in moving the needle. But I do also agree that, this is, to me, the nuts and bolts of what we are here for. And I know this has been a difficult year, but I also believe that the way the data was presented to us last time, it gave those year-over-year assessment, the trends. And I think that is much more beneficial, because you're not just looking at it as a snapshot, you're looking at it in a totality. And are we moving it? Because you can see from a 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and those deficiencies are the lower quartile. I mean, it's concerning. And so to that end, as a board, what resources do we need to be giving to our staff, or from a professional development, or there's a myriad of things, but to put that in and make sure we are providing that, and we have a timeline, and we're evaluating it as much as possible, so that we don't come back at the end of the year and say, I hope the FSA was going to turn out this way, but we didn't. So, because I did the same thing as Mrs. Brown did, as I started to look at, calculating how many students. I mean, the human component, when you start putting percentages out there, it's easy to overlook the actual human side of it. But I know that there are many, many students, I mean, teachers are working their rear ends off, and I know this has been tough. So I think it's our job to see these numbers and respond in however we can to, to support them. So I don't know, Dr. Asplin or.
Yeah, we need to shut down so that they can move for the meeting.
Okay.
So if you could.
I guess I'll talk about this some other time, not important.
No, we are going to talk about it at our workshop next month. We've already said that. Karen?
Quickly, and it's at the heart of everything that we've talked about, and we all said we prioritize, and not asking for it at this minute, but if we could have an ongoing update on the additional planning time for teachers, given the concurrent challenges and the entire presentation, I'd like to focus in on how we are supporting our teachers and how that planning time's going and any way that we can support the challenges that might come with that. In addition to that, I've had questions about the equity report that was presented at a previous workshop, and I know that a fellow board member asked for additional data. As a board member, may I have that report if and when it's completed, and will it be available to the public? Thank you.
Dr. Brennan, on the
just very quickly on the planning day, I know our staff has been doing a very, very good job of working with some of the schools to make that happen. And I received word this morning that we were able to work through that, and I'll be talking to the union right after our board meeting today to try and solidify a particular day. So we've been working on it, and hopefully we'll be there this afternoon.
Awesome.
Okay, with that, we will close the workshop, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock for our regular board meeting.